She had 3 seconds to make a decision that would change her entire life. She didn't think. She just moved. And that was the moment everything started. The night was ordinary in the way that dangerous nights always are, quiet right up until they aren't. Delilah Asani was 26 years old, Ethiopian-American, and 3 months into what was supposed to be a temporary waitressing job at Ember, one of the most expensive private dining rooms in Washington, D.C. The kind of place where the menu had no prices and the guests had no last names worth saying out loud. She had a degree in social work from Howard University. She had ambition that burned clean and low the way charcoal does, steady, long, and hot enough to leave a mark. But ambition doesn't pay the rent on the first of the month. So she carried plates. She was good at reading rooms. She just didn't know this one was about to detonate. It was a Friday. Every table full, every candle lit, every conversation a performance. Delilah moved through the floor the way she always did. Efficient, invisible enough not to disturb the theater of wealth, present enough to catch every signal. A man at table 4 whose smile was 3 drinks behind his eyes. A couple at 6 who had stopped touching each other somewhere between the appetizer and the entree. She noticed all of it. It was the skill that made her good at this job and had once made her excellent at another. She was midway to table 11 when she heard it. Not a crash, not a shout, something quieter and worse. The specific flat sound of a hand meeting a face. The kind of sound that cuts through an entire room and freezes it. 1 second of total silence. Then she turned. A young woman was pressed against the wall near the private alcove at the back. She was maybe 23, dressed like she had come to celebrate something. Her cheek was already changing color. Her hand was rising slowly to cover it, and the man standing over her, clean suit, easy posture, the casual confidence of someone who had never once been told no, had his hand raised again. Delilah set her tray on the nearest surface without looking where it landed. She walked toward them, not running, not slowly, the walk of a person who has already made the decision and is simply executing it. She stepped directly between them. His hand came down and stopped because she was in the way. He looked at her. She looked at him. The entire restaurant held its breath. "Touch her again," Delilah said. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The man's jaw tightened. He looked around the room. Every single person watching. He looked back at Delilah. He lowered his hand slowly, straightened his jacket with 2 deliberate pulls, looked past her at the woman behind her with something cold and absolute in his eyes, and walked out. The room exhaled. Delilah turned around. The young woman was holding her face, eyes wet, looking at her with an expression split equally between relief and terror. "Are you okay?" Delilah said. The woman nodded, her lips pressed together. She was holding herself very, very still, the way a person does when they are afraid that if they move, they will break entirely. Then someone walked through the door, and every single thing changed. If you want to see what happens when a woman with nothing to lose steps in front of the wrong man, keep watching. This story doesn't stop here. He came through the entrance the way certain men do, not loud, not urgent, but impossible to ignore. Tall, dark coat, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm. It comes from absolute, long practice control. The kind of man who had decided, sometime years ago, that he was always the most dangerous person in any room he walked into, and had simply never been wrong. Every person he passed leaned back slightly without realizing they were doing it. He crossed the restaurant in 12 steps and stopped in front of Delilah. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he looked past her at the young woman against the wall. "Suyan," he said. His voice was low and measured. "Are you hurt?" The young woman, his sister, shook her head. He looked back at Delilah. The entire restaurant was watching, waiting. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, held it out. "Your name," he said. Delilah looked at the card. Clean white. A name in both Korean and English. James Kang. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. Delilah, she said. She did not take the card. Something crossed his face. Small, like a door opening 1 inch before closing again. You are not going to take it, he said. I didn't do it for a card, she said simply. The silence in that room was total. And then James Kang did something that made every person watching go completely still. He bowed. Small, deliberate. A bow that meant something given by this man in this room to a waitress in a black uniform. Nobody made a sound. He straightened, placed his hand at his sister's back, guided her toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. Turn back once. Delilah, he said. She looked at him. I will remember, he said. And he walked out. The restaurant erupted. Delilah picked up her tray, checked the table number on her pad, and went back to work. 7 days of silence. She did not think about him the next morning. She told herself that with enough certainty that it almost worked. Almost. Delilah arrived at Ember at 10 for the opening prep shift and found her manager waiting at the side entrance with the specific expression of a man who has received a phone call he wasn't prepared for. Mr. Osei wants to see you, he said. She followed him to the back office. The owner of Ember, a careful, meticulous man who had spent 20 years building a place with zero drama, was sitting behind his desk with the look of someone who had not slept. The man from last night, he said carefully. Do you know who he is? No, she said honestly. He pressed his palms flat on his desk. His name is James Kang. He is connected to people I cannot afford to have complications with. Delilah looked at him steadily. He was hitting a woman, she said. In your restaurant. In front of every person in this room. Mr. Osei's jaw worked once. Delilah, if you are about to tell me, I should have looked away, she said quietly. Then we do not have the same understanding of what kind of place this is. He looked at her for a long moment. Exhaled. I'm not telling you that, he said finally. I'm telling you to be careful. She stood up. I'm always careful. Good morning, Mr. Osei. She walked back to the floor, tied her apron, and started her shift. But something had shifted. Not fear. Awareness. The specific awareness of a woman who has stepped into a current and is only now beginning to understand how deep the water is. She didn't know that on the other side of the city, James Kang had not slept either. He sat in his office until 4 in the morning. His most trusted lieutenant, a quiet man named David Shin, sat across from him in the low light. Neither of them spoke for a long time. How long? James said finally. David looked to the table. 3 months, he said. Possibly longer. James said nothing. A long pause. She didn't tell me, he said. David said nothing. She was protecting him, James said. No. He stood up and walked to the window. Washington at 4 in the morning was still moving, still lit, still entirely indifferent to what was happening in this room. She was protecting me, he said quietly. From what I would do. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned from the window. Marcus Chun, he said, the man from the restaurant. Find everything, every account, every name attached to his, every person who has ever done business with him. He picked up his jacket. And find her. David looked up. The waitress. Delilah, James said. Her full name. Where she is from. Why she is in this city. Everything. David was quiet for a moment. You want to reward her? James looked at him steadily. I want to understand her, he said. David wrote it down. He didn't say anything else. But he understood, in the particular way that people who have known someone for a long time understand things that are not being said, that this was not simply curiosity. 7 days passed. Delilah worked her shifts. She did not hear from anyone. She told herself she was not waiting. She was not waiting. She was absolutely, completely not waiting. She cleaned her apartment on Saturday. She called her mother in Atlanta on Sunday. She took a long walk along the National Mall on Monday afternoon. the capital white and indifferent in the distance, and stood at the edge of the reflecting pool and watched the water and thought about the look on his face when she had not taken the card. Not anger, something she could not name and did not try to. She had done the right thing. It was enough. It had to be enough. She walked home. On the 7th day, he came back. Not during dinner service. Mid-afternoon, the restaurant quiet, a few staff moving through the floor, the light coming through the front windows long and amber. She was wiping down the bar when she heard the door. She looked up. James Kang walked in. No assistant. No yakit. Just him. He sat down at the nearest stool like he had been there 100 times. She set a glass of water in front of him without being asked. "We're not open yet," she said. "I know," he said. "Why are you here?" she said. He looked at her directly. "Because I found out who you are," he said. "And I came to apologize for looking." What he found out. She went still. "You had no right to do that," she said. "No," he said. "I didn't." The honesty of it landed in a way she hadn't expected. She looked at him, not the way she had in the restaurant, measuring, deciding. This was different. This was the look of a woman recalibrating. "Then why?" she said. He held her gaze. "Because I needed to understand who steps in front of a raised hand for a stranger," he said quietly, "and doesn't want anything for it afterward." She didn't answer. He kept going. He told her what he had found. Delilah Asani, 26, social work degree from Howard University. Born in Atlanta, raised between Atlanta and Addis Ababa, which explained something about the particular quality of her stillness. The specific composure of a person who had learned, early, to carry more than one world at once. She had spent 2 years after graduation working with a nonprofit in Connecticut supporting migrant communities. She had moved to D.C. 8 months ago, chasing a position with a federal advocacy program that had lost its funding 3 weeks before she arrived. So she had taken a waitressing job. Temporary. It had been 8 months of temporary. She listened to all of this with her arms folded and her expression completely unreadable. When he finished, she said, "That's a lot of work for a woman who just stopped a man from hitting someone." "Yes," he said, "it is." She looked at him, and he reached into his jacket, placed something on the bar between them. A folder. Clean. No card this time. "A position," he said, "with an advocacy fund for migrant and undocumented communities in D.C. and New York. Legal support, case management, policy outreach. The kind of work that my degree was built for," she said. Her voice was careful, very careful. "Yes," he said. She didn't touch the folder. "Why?" she said. He looked at the bar for a moment. When he looked back up, his expression had shifted into something she hadn't seen on his face before. Something unguarded. "My mother came to this country alone," he said. "From Busan. She was 24. No resources. Nobody who spoke her language or knew how to help her navigate anything. She managed." He paused. "But it cost her more than it should have. More than it needed to." He looked at her steadily. "This fund has existed for 3 years. It needed someone who understood the work from the inside. Not theoretically. A beat. I found her." Delilah looked at the folder. Then at him. Then at the folder again. The afternoon light moved across the bar between them. "I don't want to owe you anything," she said finally. "You don't," he said immediately. "This is not a debt. It's," he paused, like he was choosing the precise word. "It's the right thing to do. That is the entire reason." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I will read it," she said. "That is all I'm asking," he said. He stood up. He looked at her one more time, and this time there was something in that look that had nothing to do with the folder, and both of them knew it. "Thank you," he said. "For my sister." She held his gaze. "Take care of her," she said simply. He nodded once and walked out. She stood at the bar for a long moment after the door closed. Then she picked up the folder. She read it twice. That night, Soo-Yun Kang found her. She came to Ember on her own. No call ahead, no escort, and sat at the same stool her brother had sat at 2 hours earlier. She looked at Delilah with clear eyes, still bruised at the cheekbone, still holding herself a little carefully, but clear. "I came to say thank you myself," she said. "Not through him. Myself." Delilah said nothing. "I had been telling myself for 3 months that it wasn't that bad," Soo-Yun said. Her voice was steady, that I was managing it, that if I was careful enough, quiet enough, small enough, it would eventually get better. She looked at her hands, and then a stranger walked in front of his hand. She looked up. Something about watching someone simply refuse to accept it. She stopped. Her throat moved. Made me stop accepting it too. Delilah said, "You did that. Not me. You made it possible to believe I could," Soo-Yun said. They sat in the quiet for a while. Two women who had been complete strangers 9 days ago, finding in each other the particular ease of people who do not need to explain everything. Before she left, Soo-Yun paused at the door. "Did you read the folder he brought?" "Yes," Delilah said, and Soo-Yun's smile was small and knowing. "He doesn't do things like that," she said. "For people." She looked at Delilah directly. "He came home that night, after everything, after dealing with Marcus, after checking on me, and the first thing he asked about," she paused, "was not the man who hurt me." She held Delilah's gaze. "It was you," she said simply, and walked out. "Start Monday." She sent him a message that night. One line. I read it. "I accept." He replied with 2 words. "Start Monday." She started Monday, and she was not prepared for what she found. The fund was real. That was the first thing. Not a gesture, not a vanity project, a functioning organization with permanent staff, active cases, a budget that moved, and a waiting list of people who needed exactly what it offered. Delilah walked in on Monday morning, and within 4 hours understood that she had not been handed something. She had been handed something that needed her. There is a difference, a significant one. By the end of the first week, she had taken on 6 cases. By the end of the second, 11. Women navigating visa complications that employers were deliberately exploiting. Men who had been terminated without cause and had no idea they had legal recourse. Families who had simply needed one person to sit across from them and say, "I know what this looks like. I know what to do. You are not alone in this." Delilah was that person. Every single time. She threw herself into the work completely. The way you only can when the work is the thing you were built for, and you've been waiting for it longer than you realized. James appeared. Not constantly, not intrusively. Occasionally, checking on the organization's progress. Sitting in on meetings, not to run them, but to listen with the focused attention of someone who had read the details and not just been briefed on them. He asked about specific cases by name. He remembered things she had mentioned in passing 2 weeks earlier. He had that quality, the particular stillness she had first noticed in the restaurant, of making whoever was across from him feel like the only thing worth looking at. She noticed. She told herself she wasn't noticing. She noticed anyway. Then one evening, the office emptied, and it was just the 2 of them. It was a Thursday. The rest of the staff had left by 7. She was finishing a case report at her end of the long conference table. He was reviewing budget proposals at the other end. The room was quiet around them. The city moved through its usual Thursday outside the windows. She did not look up when she spoke. "Why do you fund this?" she said. "Because it needs funding," he said. "That's not the full answer," she said. She heard him set his papers down. "My mother," he said. She looked up. He was looking at the table, not at her. "She managed," he said. "She built something. She gave Soo-Yun and me everything she had." He paused. "But I watched her do it. I saw what it cost. The years of not knowing her rights. The jobs that underpaid her because she didn't know they were allowed to. The time she needed a person who understood what she was navigating, and there was nobody." He looked up then, directly at her. "This is the one thing I can do," he said simply, "to make it cost less for someone else." Delilah looked at him, at this man who moved through the world like someone who had long ago made every decision, whose power was real and considerable and not the sanitized kind, who had bowed to a waitress in a full room and walked out like it had been the only reasonable thing to do. Sitting across from her right now, with his guard down and his reason honest. She opened her mouth to respond. The door opened. Soo-Yeon walked in. She stopped, looked at Delilah, looked at her brother, looked at the quality of silence in the room between them, the kind that has its own language, its own weather. She understood it immediately and completely. She set a paper bag of food on the near surface, walked to Delilah first, stood in front of her. 3 months, she said quietly. Her eyes were bright but steady. I carried 3 months alone because somewhere along the way I had stopped believing that anyone would step in. She took Delilah's hand in both of hers. You stepped in for a stranger, without thinking about what it would cost you. She looked at her steadily. You gave me back something I didn't know I had lost. Delilah said nothing, because some things don't need a response. They need to be received. Soo-Yeon let go of her hand, turned to her brother. He had gone completely still. And you, she said. He looked at her. You have always been my door, she said. Every single time, without question, without ever making me feel small for needing it. She held his gaze. Thank you for being the kind of man she would step in front of a raised hand for. The room went absolutely silent. Soo-Yeon looked at them both one final time. That small, knowing look, the precise expression of a younger sister who has understood something about her brother that he has not yet admitted to himself. The food is from a place on Connecticut Avenue, she said simply. Don't let it get cold. She walked back out. The door closed. The room was exactly as it had been 30 seconds ago, and entirely different. What isn't said? Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Delilah laughed. Quietly, genuinely, the kind of laugh that escapes before you decide to let it. James looked at her. Something in his face shifted, a warmth that had nothing careful about it. She planned that, Delilah said. Completely, he said. They looked at each other. And for the first time since any of this had started, neither of them looked away. He asked her to dinner 3 days later. She said yes before he finished the sentence. He took her to a small Korean restaurant in Adams Morgan that had no sign outside and no reservation system, the kind of place you only knew about if someone brought you. The owner, a woman in her 60s with ink-black hair and the focused precision of someone who had been doing exactly this for 40 years, greeted James with 2 hands and a warmth that told Delilah everything she needed to know about how he treated the people who fed him. They sat at a corner table. No background music, no performance. The food arrived in careful, considered sequences, and they talked. Not about the fund, not about Soo-Yeon, not about the night at Ember that had started all of this. They talked about his mother's first apartment in Flushing, New York. The one-room space she had filled with plants because she said green things made any 4 walls feel like a home. They talked about Delilah's grandmother in Addis Ababa who had taught her to read using a Bible and a newspaper and told her that a woman who could read was a woman who could never be entirely trapped. They talked about the specific loneliness of being the capable one, the person everyone trusts to handle things, the person who handles things, and the way that role can quietly hollow you out over years because everyone knows you are strong, but nobody asks if you are tired. Do people ask you that? She said. If you're tired? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Do they ask you? She considered this. My mother does, she said. In a specific way. She calls me on the first Sunday of every month and asks how I'm sleeping. Not how I'm doing. Sleeping. Because she says everything real shows up in the sleep first. He looked at her. How are you sleeping? He said. She smiled. The kind of smile that surprises the person doing it. Better lately, she said. He looked at the table. Something in the line of his jaw was different. Unguarded in the way that takes years and the right person to produce. I don't do this, he said. This. Any of this, he said. He looked up at her. I'm aware of what I am. I'm aware of the weight that comes attached to me. There are very few people who can sit across from me like this. He gestured between them and not be calculating something. She looked at him steadily. What am I calculating? He held her gaze. Nothing, he said. That is why I am here. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. 1 second. Then she took it back. Tell me about your mother's plants, she said. He smiled then. Full. Unhidden. The first time she had seen that. It was considerable. She thought about that smile on the drive home. She thought about it for 3 days after. She was not naive about what James Kang was. She had read enough, understood enough, paid enough attention to the way people moved around him and the particular weight of his silences to understand that the world he operated in was not clean in the way she required her own life to be. She had spent her whole career fighting for people made invisible by systems that had too much power. She was not going to fall for the power itself. She knew that. She told herself that. She was still thinking about his smile on day 3 when Soo-Yun called her. He told me he laughed at dinner, Soo-Yun said without greeting. Genuinely. He told me he laughed. A pause. Do you know how long it has been since I have heard him say that about an evening? How long? Delilah said. Years, Soo-Yun said. Simply. They were quiet for a moment. Soo-Yun, Delilah said carefully. I need you to tell me honestly. The parts of his world that I'm not part of. The parts that make rooms lean back when he walks in. A long pause. He keeps it away from people he cares about, Soo-Yun said. Not by pretending it doesn't exist. By building a wall between it and them. Deliberately. Completely. Another pause. He has never wanted to protect anyone from it before, she said. Not like this. Delilah said nothing. I'm just telling you, Soo-Yun said quietly. What I observe. Delilah sat with that for a long time after she hung up. Then she picked up her phone and texted him. The coffee near my office is terrible. If you're free, Thursday. His reply came in under a minute. I'll bring the coffee. What gets built? He brought the coffee. He also brought pastries from a Korean bakery in New York that he apparently, had driven down that morning. She stared at the box. He looked completely unbothered. They don't ship, he said simply. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. He watched her laugh with the expression of a man who has decided he wants to see that specific thing as many times as possible for the rest of his life and has only just realized it. He did not say that out loud, but she saw it, and she let herself see it. Weeks moved. The fund expanded. Delilah hired 2 additional caseworkers. James showed up on Thursdays with coffee. Always good, always too much, and stayed until the work pulled her back in, and then sat at the corner of the conference table and read while she finished, and they left together into whatever the evening offered. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the specific, quiet accumulation of 2 people learning each other in real time. He met her mother when she flew into D.C. in November, a woman of absolute stillness and absolute perception who shook James Kang's hand, looked at him for 3 full seconds, and said, "You have your mother's kind of careful." He looked surprised. Then something in his eyes softened in a way that Delilah filed and kept. "You knew her?" he said. "No," her mother said. "But I know what it looks like when a person was raised by someone who did everything alone." She patted his hand once and walked into the kitchen. Delilah looked at him. He looked at her. "I like her," he said. "I know," she said. "She likes you too. How can you tell?" She smiled. "She only measures people she thinks are worth measuring," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "And you? Have you measured me?" She considered this with genuine care. The months, the Thursdays, the way he listened, fully, with the same stillness he brought to everything, as though whatever she was saying was the only thing happening in the world. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he had stood in a restaurant full of people and bowed. "I measured you the first night," she said. "In the restaurant." He looked at her. "A man bowed to a waitress in front of a full room," she said, "because it was the right thing to do." She looked at him steadily. "That is a very specific kind of man." He held her gaze. "And," she took a breath. "And I think you have been waiting," she said carefully, "to be known by someone who doesn't need you to be powerful. Someone who saw you before she knew the name." Something moved across his face. The door-opening expression she had cataloged that first night, but this time it did not close again. He crossed the room in 3 steps. He stood in front of her, close, but not yet, and looked at her with the complete, deliberate attention of a man making a decision he has been building toward for months. "Delilah," he said. Quiet. Her name in his voice was different from how anyone had ever said it. "I have spent a week finding you," he said, "and the rest of the time since trying to deserve the finding." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed the space between them. The city moved on outside. The work waited on the desks. Soo-yeon, wherever she was probably smiling. Some things don't need to be said. They just need to be arrived at. There is a specific kind of love that does not announce itself, that does not crash into your life, making noise and demanding to be seen. It walks in steady. It sets down coffee. It sits at the corner of your conference table and reads while you finish your work. It bows in a full room because it is simply the right thing to do. It finds you, not with a card, not with power, not with the weight of what it is, with honesty, with the patience to understand you before asking anything, with a sister who walks in at exactly the right moment and leaves food from the place on Connecticut Avenue and tells you not to let it get cold. Delilah Asani had come to Washington, D.C. to do work that mattered. She had not come looking for anything else, but she had learned from a Friday night and a sound and a 3-second decision that the most significant things in a life are rarely the things you walk toward. They're the things you walk into without knowing. The things you would do again without hesitation, even knowing exactly what they would cost you. She would do it again, every time, without question,